if y'all remember, because we've been talking about this for weeks in here, I told y'all in the beginning of this trial, when it first started, they made a rule in court that said when things like this, like the tapes, or even remember when I talked about the screenshots, the photos from, we're not able to see them. Even the attorney gallery is not able to see them. Prosecution showing, right? Yes, this is the prosecution is still presenting their case, but they're doing this because they want to make sure that nothing leaks out of court, nothing. Like, it's just very sensitive stuff. So yesterday, the jury got to see some of the freak-off tapes, and the way that they did it is they shut down all the monitors in the court. They give the jury headphones, and everybody just sitting there. So there were some reports that, and some of my friends that were in like the main courtroom area said to me that you could hear kind of like, you know, someone's listening to something in the headphones and it's like loud. You can hear little things like little moans here and there. But I don't know how in detail that here is. You don't really know what you're hearing because you can't hear. First of all, the way that you're seated in court versus where the jury is, it's not like you're next to them. So you can be hearing something and you don't know, like you don't know what you're hearing. So they didn't have a little screen in front of them to watch it. They just had to listen. The jury got a screen that could also watch it. So that, you know, there's men and women on the jury pool. You know, a lot of people were asking questions about how did the jury look while they were watching, because they was playing in small like doses. So they played 3 freak-off videos. They played like 11 to 12 minutes of each video with the headphones on, so that they could listen to the audio. But they're watching it. There was a report from TMZ, and they do have, shout out to Jacob Wasserman, they do have a reporter in the part as well too. And their reporter said that there was a giggle. I was not told about a giggle, but he reported that there was one witness one juror that giggled during it, but that people were just watching it. And I need a break after, like the juror, like I need a bathroom break after. No, they were adults on that test, man. It's the truth. They were adults on the tape. Well, they only got it was forced. It was consensual. So the clips are 11 to 12 minutes, but they only watched about 30 seconds of each one, right? So it's not like they're sitting there watching a whole. Well, for sure, because they were on for days. Yeah, exactly. But it was enough to have impact. So I was also told that. Well, first of all, I think that you're just really smart. I talked about this on the podcast, the latest with Norman Rose in detail. So make sure you guys go take a listen to today's episode. I thought that it was really smart that the prosecution wanted to play the tapes now, because you know that the prosecution will be ending their case by Friday, right? So we days out from the prosecution saying it'll be good. We did enough. But my question to you is, right? Yes. If the free calls were consensual, right? And hearing all these testimonies, we're hearing that it was consensual. How would they use it, right? Yeah, how would they able to they're watching the consensual aspects. It's not like it's saying that did he tie somebody up or he forced somebody on these tapes or he beat somebody on these tapes. It's consensual sex. Yeah, correct. I mean, because you have to think about all the testimony that you heard up until this, right? Up until this point, like even though DDC is alleged that it isn't consensual, you heard from multiple women, you heard from consensual. Well, Cassie said that she did. She alleged she did it because she was under the coercion of the force of something that made her not like she was being blackmailed. There was different things that she alleges happened that made her do all these things. So technically, I don't know how you argue consent around that, but she's saying, okay, it might come off for me saying as if this was consensual, but you got to think about all the things that were up against me. I was like, put it in that tape, but she also said that she said something. Yes, but think about it, right? Like, so even in your room, somebody literally, like, it's so hard that they're not trying to hear something. You hear little noises coming from the audio, and you're actually now getting to it's just putting color to everything that you heard. You're sure. I mean, you want to. The only reason why I did this was consensual. Nothing was against the law. He's not being, accused for, beating anybody up on the free call. They just did that to embarrass him. They just want to show that he's being his ass. I don't. The only reason I disagree with that is because when you're in that courtroom and you're seeing these women on the stand crying, saying, "Yo, my life would have been over if I said no. I would have had a place to live." But all these allegations, when it comes to Cassie, we saw the physical violence that she endured, where she said because of that physical violence, she had no way out. That's what she alleged, right? And then you see the actual, like, here's exactly what she was made to do. So you got all of the why, and then here's the what. If you put it together, and then you have that's a case. But if he's not on the tape stand over to say, do this or what do you see? But you're just
I'm supposed to say. I mean, maybe it's always been a curious man. He should have been more curious about his wife. That's what he should have been curious about. Trying to figure that shit out.
takes some time to give it up for her on right now. Roxy has just announced a new job. Congratulations to Roxy. Yes. So per the Hollywood Reporter and Roxy herself, she posted it as well. She will be co-hosting the American Gladiators reboot on Amazon Prime. Yes. Now this reboot coming to Amazon Prime, like the old show, they got together a bunch of different people across sports, and they're going to be doing a bunch of different things, but they're going to keep some of the original classic challenges that they have to do, like the gauntlet, the hand tug, the eliminator. It should be co-hosting with WWE superstar Miz and Chris Rose from the NFL Game Day on the NFL Network. Yes. That is the gig that people were like dragging her on. I mean, it's easy for her sister. Everybody, congratulations, Roxy. Yes. Exactly. Especially our industry. Now also sitting the BT Awards. Yes. Yes. They will not change things. So in the BT Awards president, he spoke up about not recognizing Marlon. Let's take a listen. And also Tim Kai didn't recognize a couple other people as well. He didn't know who Robin Thicke was. a lot
What's
of
the song?
things happening in that video. But according to reports from the Washington Post and from another reporter, there is an unnamed victim who allegedly met with law enforcement and claimed that AB opened fire at him following a physical altercation, which prompted the warrant for his arrest. And reports also state that the warrant will require a $10,000 bond and require Antonio Brown to remain under house arrest pending trial. Yes, it is. Now, the world's hurt. I will be headed to work today. Yes, well, we ain't got that much time, but I will say, yesterday on the stand, Jane Doe, they finished her cross-examination and re-cross-examination, and I know that she's speaking to certain charges like the trafficking, the origin of divorce, and those things, but I really don't understand why she's on the stand. Like, a lot of her testimony is just so flip-floppy. Yesterday on the stand, she actually admitted to being okay with the free calls as long as she was getting what she wanted from Diddy, which was time, attention, be treated like a girlfriend. Yeah, money goes. So all the things that they're trying to prove is like, okay, you gotta be paid, you gotta be saying that you're gonna be exploited for certain things because you're doing certain things. She's like, well, I was okay with that as long as I was getting what I wanted. So doesn't that look really vengeful on her to the truth? And then she also said, right, following Cassie talking to him, I never seen him. He never act like that. I never seen him act like that at all. So she did say that, but then they actually did get into a physical altercation after all the Cassie stuff. But it happened one time, and it was, I don't want to say it was mutual combat because, you know, they'll argue that a man strength is stronger than a woman, but she did, she slammed his head into a counter, and then the back and forth happened physically. It's like, his head was so wrong. Yes. So escorts to have sex with his wife and everybody watched and she watched. What was that about talent? She didn't just land in Vegas. She flew on that big rapper's jet with the big rapper and his wife and her girlfriend because her homegirl was friends with them. And she got there, they did a bunch of things, but one of the things that stood out was they ended up in a hotel room with a former escort that her and Diddy had, done everything with. And there was a freak off going down allegedly, and she was there. They asked her if she moved from there. The freak off without Diddy. They flew in to go to a play, and then it ended in a freak off for this other rapper and his wife. And wrapping up, but they did make the point that, Diddy was not there, and also they asked her, did she engage? Did she have sex with the rapper? Because she mentioned rapper allegedly wanted to have sex with her. She said no. But then they brought up the fact that she flashed her nipples to the room. And she said that so like,
They find male prostitution doing all this weird shit. He said that. Remember, he went live about all this shit, remember? And he went live talking, addressing everything. Addressing all that shit. Remember, he was like, I know he was fire, I know he was throwing up. Tell you, the only ones who walk around with titties out. That's why this is the crack, not the fire. Yeah, I can hear her.
No, she called it like a party because she was,
Hey, why does clothes smell like that? What happened? Thanks. Everyone is from back to sleep. That's what I was saying. That was cold. Hold on. This what? It's the foil?
It's an astounding story for people who live here too. This is what
We
people
gotta
are making
warm
to
up.
early Sunday morning. In fact, I can tell you
It's
personally,
alright. That's why I
I
opened
went
the
to
door.
church Sunday morning. Somebody
Then
in
I'm
church
burning.
said,
I'm
"Did you hear
standing
what
right
happened?"
here.
There were 3 bodies laying in a front yard not far from here.
Alright.
There was a national news story from about 20 years ago, 05, when 4 graduating seniors at the
Oh man.
West Virginia High School were gunned down after prom night.
A lot of the people say that there's a Detroit drug connection because there have been arrests lately of some different people from Detroit who have come down and tried to more or less set up shop, trying to sell crack cocaine in Huntington and trying to make it a market where they can make money, supply kids down here, high school kids with guns, with drugs, and with the product itself, and see if they can make Huntington become part of their community and really corner the drug community in Huntington from this Detroit connection.
That's still unsolved, but there's a woman from Detroit named Bunny who got convicted of ordering the homicide of an addict there down in Huntington who stole from her spot.
Though Shirlethia Bunny Holmes was convicted of ordering a hit on Wendy Morgan in 2004 and sentenced to life with mercy, meaning she would have been eligible for parole in 15 years. Holmes was granted parole last month, but prosecutors argued that because she was in federal prison at the time of that conviction, she didn't begin serving time for the Morgan case until 2011. And with that in mind, she will not be eligible for parole until November of 2026.
And she's been locked up since 2011, and they're about to let her out, and they've been trying to keep her in as long as possible because they had informants say she ordered the quadruple murder of those 4 kids who were locals.
4 teens, ages 16 to 19, shot and killed in a driveway in the early morning hours after prom night in 2005.
It affects both communities. The violence that it brings here to Detroit with the source supply section, and then the drugs and the violence down into West Virginia where they're not used to that.
The Detroit, West Virginia connection in headlines just this month. the suspect in the murder of 19-year-old Tamarian Tiller, arrested on heroin charges in West Virginia. DEA Detroit Field Office Assistant Special Agent in Charge Kent Kleinschmidt explained why the pipeline exists in the first place.
You take a prescription pill here in Detroit that's worth $20 on the street. You bring it down into the West Virginia area, it's worth $40.
So why West Virginia? Well, it's kind of a parallel to Detroit. West Virginia was a place in Detroit that used to be very thriving. It was based on one major industry, coal mining, and a huge, like a well-paid working class, just like Detroit did. Detroit declined first, and all the things you hear being said about these cities in West Virginia, Charleston, the capital, Huntington, are the same types of things they used to say about Detroit, or still do. Declining population, high crime, poverty-stricken.
Well, using U.S. Census data, a new ranking gives Charleston, West Virginia, the dubious honor of being the fastest shrinking small city in the nation.
As Detroit, which is known as a hustler city, as there's less and less people in Detroit to sell anything to, guys from Detroit and women, people from Detroit spread out around the country.
In 2018, a major operation dismantling a drug ring led by the Peterson brothers of Detroit.
And it's like in Detroit, knowing how to sell dope is like learning a trade or something. I mean, I'm not even someone who did that, I wouldn't say professionally too much, but I know how to set up a spot, create a network, put a buffer between you and the people buying, so even if there's the police infiltrate, they don't know who you are. This is all things you just pick up. How to work a block, etc. and so forth. You just pick it up. It's like being a carpenter.
The top prosecutor in Knox County says 1 in 5 deadly shootings this year has ties to the city of Detroit.
And so in some of these places, a big chunk of the homicides, the victims or the accused are from Detroit. There's Detroit people down there beefing with each other.
Investigators say they regularly see that northern connection again and again in violent crime.
Philip Snead's life ended in the middle of this North Knoxville road. Knoxville police say Vondre Allen shot him to death in July after an argument. But as investigators unraveled the case, they found a common thread. Snead and Allen both came from Detroit. It's a connection the district attorney says ties together 1 in 5 murders in Knox County.
Out of Detroit, rap music has gotten popular, and the subject matter of many of the songs seems to be fictionalized versions of what's going on in these news stories. In the same places the music's popular, it's probably the same place people were going. I was listening to local West Virginia rappers, Tennessee rappers, Louisville rappers. Definitely got a heavy Detroit influence. Maybe they didn't just get that from listening to music. Maybe they met the people.
Supply comes out of Detroit, Michigan, but Knoxville is a demand city.
Fentanyl, heroin, and meth from the Motor City come down I-75 to Knoxville.
Illegal drug activity, particularly from Detroit, is absolutely driving violent crime.
So in 2016, Huntington had 28 ODs in one day. Huntington got known as the OD capital of America. In 60 Minutes went there.
Nestled in the Appalachian Mountains along the eastern borders of Kentucky and Ohio sits Huntington, West Virginia, a place so consumed by the opioid epidemic, it has been crowned the overdose capital of America. At its worst, people here were dying from drug abuse at a rate 8 times the national average. The small city of 50,000 fell victim to a fading economy and birth of despair.
So to quote Malcolm X, it's the chickens coming home to roost. And let Detroit turn into a place with no economic opportunity, full of people that grew up being around, people selling dope. And then when there's no one left to sell dope to in Detroit, I guess, they go around the country, or at least around the rest of the Midwest. And when the feds did the special task force for Detroit dealers spreading out to the Midwest, they said it was the first time they ever did a special task force for a city that was not considered a source city, like not a place where things enter the country. Florida, New York, LA, San Diego, Texas. But because Detroit's like the poorest major city in the country, all these Medicaid recipients, people selling their medication, either they rather have the money or they rather buy the H, because H is highly available and cheap in Detroit. That task force, the Fed said they couldn't believe when they checked Detroit. This was back in maybe 2016 or something. Had the cheapest, 2015, right before Fentanyl took over, had the cheapest street level H prices. Why would that be? Because there's so much competition. People in Detroit sell drugs for the smallest profit margin. That's why everybody wants to go out of town.
The heroin hub is 500 miles away in the border town of Detroit.
We first reported on the Michigan pipeline 5 years ago. To try to stop the killing, KPD says it targets efforts on drug investigations.
It was not just West Virginia. Knoxville, Tennessee has a bunch of Detroit people. And even North Dakota has people from Detroit getting arrested. So this task force that was set up, people didn't notice it, but I saw the press release when it happened. So they were given funding to different departments all around the whole, in the Midwest technically encompasses like the Dakotas to Ohio, of course.
These are many of the articles detailing various crimes, mainly happening in the hands of individuals from Detroit. Murder.
My good friend, who I caught a case with in Arizona, when I was checking on him, I saw he was doing time in Ohio. So when I just saw him, he's been out. He said there were so many guys in Ohio prison. He got caught a bunch of pills, like $40,000 pill deal he was doing or something. Said there was so many Detroit guys. He just said and he's, my friend is kind of intimidating in prison. He was supposedly. But he said he had basically a gang of Detroit boys, and they ran whatever prison he was in Ohio, because there was so many Detroit guys in the prison in Ohio.
Investigators are also building connections from Knoxville Police to Detroit PD and federal agencies.
If you're from Detroit and you're going to these other places, I mean, some of you probably already know, but if you don't know, they make Detroit people a high priority, and there's special funding, and there's a Detroit task force. I don't know if it's still in effect. It probably is. And like I said in the opening clip of this, that was my friend on Michigan, on Detroit's Most Wanted. And they had him, they saying he did stuff in all these different states. And he's a regular, like I said about people doing things like it's just a trade. He's not any type of rah-rah guy. He's a regular family guy. I know his kids and all kind of stuff. And but they made him out to be a big deal. And the Detroit angle, so you don't want to get caught up down in one of those states and they find out you're from Detroit, because they're blaming Detroit people, not just for drugs, but for violence.
The marshals say Kelly Powell shot a man in the head in West Virginia, killing him while wounding another.
Huntington's second mass shooting with a Detroit connection. 7 people shot inside a hookah bar on New Year's Eve that launched a manhunt for Detroit's most wanted. It's a cycle of violence and crime in West Virginia that far too often begins in Detroit.
But we've been aware of the pipeline between Detroit and West Virginia for a long time. It's primarily opioids, be it prescription pills, heroin, fentanyl.
So if you ever wonder where everybody's at when you're in Detroit, well, they're gone to November. Now profit American dope.
Police had 20 arrest warrants for people allegedly involved in drug activity here at the Par-Mar gas station on the east end of Charleston. Now, 6 were arrested tonight, and we've learned that 1 was an employee at the gas station during the investigation.
Obtaining arrest warrants range you from, dealing narcotics
on the parking lot to employees dealing narcotics out of the store. Out of the 20 warrants issued, 6 people were arrested Tuesday, 3 from Charleston, 1 from Huntington, and 2 from Detroit, Michigan.
I'm showing y'all the whole world how corrupted the state of Louisiana is. I'm an innocent man. Yes, in my past, I made mistakes. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna say mistakes. I was just young. You know what I'm saying? But the system has failed a lot of people, and not just me.
That New Orleans escapee sounds like he may be telling the truth about being innocent. He was locked up for some type of DV charges involving putting his hands around his girlfriend's throat. Who knows? But what's got me interested in this New Orleans escape case isn't Mr. Massey posting his social media location. The other guy that's still out and hasn't been seen since the day that they got away was this guy Groves.
Nearly 6 years after 2 people were killed and 2 others injured in a Mardi Gras Day shooting, the shooter has been found guilty. In 2018, Derek Groves fired at a group gathered for a barbecue in the Lower Ninth Ward.
And Groves' girlfriend was taken into custody yesterday for, there's some evidence on his tablet that he talked to her on a tablet and set up some other phone calls. So they charged her with the simple, conspiracy to escape, but they don't really know how she helped them.
The U.S. Marshal's Office says Dariana Burton, the girlfriend of Derek Groves, was taken into custody outside of a home in New Orleans on St. Peter Street today around noon. Burton is accused of assisting inmate Derek Groves, who escaped from the Orleans Justice Center nearly 1 month ago.
That woman met him while she was a guard at that same place he escaped from. She had been fired because she got caught bringing in tobacco and reefers.
Department in America had a more richly deserved reputation for incompetence, corruption, and brutality than the New Orleans Police Department. In the early 90s, crime soared in New Orleans on the streets and inside the police department.
Now, what's important to know about Mr. Groves is his grandmother was back in 1994. She was Mr. Groves' grandmother when she was about 30 years old, was trying to be a good member of the community. She saw a New Orleans police officer go to a pistol whipping a guy and roughing him up.
Kim Groves was a young mother of 3 who filed a complaint against a cop for brutalizing a teenager. Attorney Mary Howe, a prominent critic of the New Orleans police, now represents the family of Kim Groves.
She was assassinated. She was murdered by Lynn Davis.
He was a cop.
He was a cop.
The FBI had Officer Davis under surveillance for drug activity and actually recorded him setting up the assassination of Kim Groves.
It was like the audio version of Rodney King for this city. The police officer circling her house in the police car, calling the hitman about come do her now, describing the clothing she's wearing.
Man, that who's standing out there right now with black jeans, a black coat, and a bitch brown skin with light brown eyes. I got the phone on and the radio. After it's done, go straight uptown and call me.
So you wonder why this culture of, no snitching and all that is so strong, and they can't solve crimes in neighborhoods, so they can't bring the crime rate down. Well,
he would, quote, handle the 30, meaning he was going to handle the investigation of her death so that no one would ever be held accountable for it. The hitman's like running late. He's having like child care problems. It's like something out of Pulp Fiction. And then finally he goes over there, kills her. Her children hear the shots and rush out and find their mother dead in the street. And then you hear him celebrating her death.
From what I'm hearing from the people, it's definitely a done deal.
And it was like a chill that went through the heart of, I think, almost everyone in the city.
Murdered by a hitman paid for by an on-duty cop. What would your respect for the law be?
2 or 3 months later, had a female officer that was arrested for killing another police officer. Right after that, had another police officer suspected of being a serial murderer. We had a couple officers that were arrested for drug activity. And also, the day I was being sworn in, a young lady was killed on the order of a police officer. Kim Groves was killed the day I was sworn in.
Why should you respect the law? I have murder victims in my family. I know people, as probably some of you watching, or maybe some of you may have multiple. My friend, I think like his brother, father, uncle, and mother's boyfriend all were murdered, unsolved, you know. Many people I know's father, their father didn't abandon them. Their father was murdered. Or someone I know, he wanted to tell a story. I said, don't tell that story in public. He's currently locked up. If he sees this, shout out to him about when he was 5. Guy came in the window. His father was at work, and a mother and father. His father was at work. Guy comes in the window, puts a knife to his throat. 5, ties him up, and then goes in another room and grapes his mother. He had to listen to it. So, man, you traumatize your whole life. So no wonder. I think that people get indoctrinated into this, don't talk to the police. It's because when you're a little kid even, and they're telling you at school, well, if something happens, call the police or something. But you're seeing things happen to your own family members or you, and the police are of no help. So why would you call the police about anything or think that they even were there to help you? So Groves, he's convicted, I think, of 2 murders and charged with 2 more. Now, I don't know the circumstances. Maybe he's a bad guy. Who knows? But, like, again, if you grew up in Lynn Davis, the NOPD cop put a hit on your grandmother that was executed, pulled off by a guy in front of her own home, what would you think about anything, about anyone's life or anything?
And Officer Davis, the U.S. attorney, put him on death row. And why were New Orleans police so corrupt? For one thing, they were among the lowest paid cops in America. For extra income, officers worked as rent-a-cops for just about anybody.
That was always a big thing in New Orleans. Always go around to these restaurants, particularly in the quarter, and you would see a uniformed policeman with a sidearm standing outside.
An officer could put on this uniform and make more money working in an outside paid detail than they could working for the city.
Pennington prohibited police from working in bars and nightclubs. At the same time, he won a huge raise for the cops, whose starting salary was just $16,000 a year. That raise, Pennington hoped, would attract better cops and remove some temptation for corruption. But the mess inside the New Orleans Police Department was just one of his problems. On the streets of the city, violent crime was out of control. And in his first year, Chief Pennington could do little to bring it down.
And that's why the same cities, the same neighborhoods, year after decade, got the highest crime. If you look at the crime statistics in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it's all the same cities. They change. Sometimes one is number 1 and one is number 6, but it's always New Orleans and DC and Memphis and Detroit, St. Louis, Baltimore, and then of course certain neighborhoods in bigger cities, parts of Brooklyn and Harlem and South Central and part of the south side of Chicago, and even worse, part of the west side of Chicago. But it's not just the people. The amount of incompetent, corrupt, crooked, and that's before you even get to racist. Police and police departments are just totally underfunded. Police departments. Jackson, Mississippi's been that murder capital for the last, or was, it had a really high murder rate a couple of years ago. I think it had 9 homicide detectives for 99 murders. You're probably going to get away with it.
Recently, District Commander Louis Dabdou briefed his officers before they swept the streets searching for drug dealers.
I think we'll all agree that the person that is robbing us, sticking pistols in grandmothers' faces, knocking people over, snatching their purses, is your street vagrant, your crackheads, your dope fiends, your wanos, whatever you want to call them. Those are the persons who are committing the crimes. However, it's a whole lot easier to catch that same person who's that drug abuser standing on the corner with a crack pipe in his pocket, hanging out in the corner all loaded with himself. So we're going after it from a different angle. That's the angle we're going after today.
While we were on hand, Dabdoo's forces detained teenagers in what cops say is a drug zone. The young men were playing football, and the cops found no evidence of drugs. This, says Attorney Mary Howe, is an example of the cops going too far.
It is not a crime to be a black man playing football in New Orleans.
New Orleans at the time that Glenn Davis had Mr. Groves' grandmother killed, NOPD police, New Orleans police, they were making, now it's 30 years ago, but it's not that long. They're making $300 a week to be a cop. $300 a week. Not a lot of money. I think in Detroit at that time, maybe they were making $500. Like that. So this is the Southern tradition of low taxes. I remember my friend, did he go to Grambling, or maybe he just went to help somebody move on to the Grambling campus or something. But when he was down there, the police would come on the radio, or they would have like a radio announcement, you know, you should stay inside after dark because the New Orleans Police Department can't protect you. They did that in Detroit a few years ago. Or no, the Detroit chief of police said everybody should get a CCW, because carry concealed, because the Detroit police can't protect you in your home. And I got a personal story about escape from New Orleans. Now, he ended up doing his time, so I ain't gonna say his name, but if he sees this, shout out to Uncle. He ended up turning himself in, but in about 90 or something like that, 89, I don't know. He went to New Orleans to do a deal that some people had set up in prison. I think it was 50 slizzabs. So he meets people while he's in New Orleans. He does the deal and he sells it all while he's there. So he's gonna get another, run it back before he brings it back to Detroit. And something happened. Maybe he was in the hotel too long and they got suspicious, or somehow the police got involved. So he gets caught with all this, like, a lot. So he's in that same New Orleans jail. And him and like 10 guys dip out. They escape. Everyone, he said, like everyone, this is when New Orleans was the murder capital. He said everyone was in there for murder. Like the old jail was basically just murderers, except him. But so they break out. All these other guys are just poverty-stricken guys from the projects. They basically go back like to their registered address or something. So they all get caught. But he had resources. He gets into somebody's backyard or something. He's like, yo, call this phone number in Detroit. They gonna wire you some money right now. And whoever's backyard he went into, they wired him some money. However it was, he gets back to Detroit and he stayed out for a while. And then they were like so incompetent, or they might have been embarrassed about the breakout, or I don't know if it was even put in the news or something, because they didn't charge him with the breakout. He didn't get any new charges, or maybe it was just part of the deal he worked to turn himself in. I mean, he did like 10 years in the feds for the initial charge. So I know someone who broke out of that same jail and got away. Like, he probably could have lived, who knows? He might have been able to stay out, but he figured he didn't want to live on the run. So there's some different information about the New Orleans breakout.
Well, 37 death row inmate sentences have been commuted. One final promise pushed by the Biden administration with less than a month in office.
Well, their lives were spared today ahead of the Trump administration's promise to continue the federal death penalty. Tonight, we have learned that a former NOPD officer was among whose sentences were commuted.
Len Davis, the man who you see right behind us, was sentenced for having a woman killed for filing a brutality complaint against him after being linked to numerous drug dealers in New Orleans. He was also dubbed the Desire Terrorist because of his aggressive policing style.
WDSU reporter Shay O'Connor is live with reaction now from those who knew the victim's family and the former officer. What are they saying, Shay?
Stella and Randy, it's here in the lower ninth ward where that mother of three was actually shot execution style after she filed a brutality complaint against the officer. Now, it's been 30 years that her children have had to live without her. I actually spoke with council member Oliver Thomas, who was on the council back then when it all went down.
My brother knew her mother very well. I knew of her because we all grew up in the lower ninth ward.
Kim Groves shot and killed in front of her home in October of 1994.
It was a sad time for all of us who lived in that neighborhood because all she was trying to do was the right thing.
After police say she filed a brutality complaint against former NOPD officer Len Davis.
In the city of New Orleans, if you didn't know about it, it's probably the most unique city in America. It has its own unique history. People, I've been there once. The food and the music's great. I mean, it's a pretty, I don't know, they had like a dark vibe to it. It's cool for a couple days. I didn't care for it. It seemed dangerous and poor. It just seemed like a hot Detroit with less police. I hope whatever is the proper outcome for the two guys that are still out, whatever justice is, if there even is such a thing, I hope it comes to them. Out Prophet American Dope.
Life for life. So live this life again. Be life. Life for the group.